Somewhere in the rainforests of Central America, there was once a seed worth more than gold. Not metaphorically, literally. The Aztec used cacao beans as actual money. A rabbit cost about 10 beans, a turkey hen around 100. And the beans were so valuable that counterfeiters got creative. Archaeologists have dug up ancient fake cacao beans made of molded clay, good enough to fool a careless buyer. Try explaining that to your bank. That obsession never really went away. Today, the average American eats somewhere around 10 to 12 pounds of chocolate a year, and during the week of Valentine's Day alone, the country goes through roughly 26 million kilograms of it, enough to require the entire annual output of some 130,000 cacao trees just for 1 week of romance. So how does a rainforest seed become the foil-wrapped bar in your pantry? That's the journey we're unwrapping today. Chocolate story starts with the Olmec people around 1500 BCE, who were likely the first to cultivate the cacao tree and turn its seeds into a drink. The tradition passed down through the Maya and eventually the Aztecs, who treated cacao as something close to sacred, a gift, they believed, from the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl himself. Their version of chocolate wasn't sweet at all. It was a thick, bitter, frothy beverage, often spiked with chili peppers and reserved mostly for nobility, warriors, and religious rituals. The Aztec emperor Montezuma II reportedly drank it by the gallon. Accounts describe him downing dozens of cups a day from golden goblets, convinced it fought fatigue and built stamina for battle. When the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived in 1519, he recognized the beans' value immediately and shipped them back to Spain. Europeans didn't love the bitterness, though, so they started blending in sugar and eventually milk, quietly rewriting chocolate from a warrior's tonic into a dessert. It took until the mid-1800s for anyone to figure out how to make a solid bar by combining cocoa powder with sugar and cocoa butter. And the smooth, meltable milk chocolate we know today didn't exist until 1875, when a Swiss chocolatier named Daniel Peter got his hands on a new invention, powdered milk, courtesy of a fellow named Henry Nestle, and used it to soften and sweeten the recipe for good. The tree behind all of this, Theobroma cacao, has a scientific name that literally translates to food of the gods, which tells you everything about how it was regarded. It only grows in a narrow band close to the equator, where the air stays warm and humid year-round. Grown from seed, a young cacao plant needs 3 to 5 years before it's mature enough to bear fruit, and its flowers don't even bloom where you'd expect. They sprout directly out of the trunk and older branches in a strange phenomenon botanists call cauliflory. Here's the part that surprises almost everyone. Cacao pollination is astonishingly inefficient. Depending on the study, somewhere between 1% and 20% of a cacao tree's flowers ever get pollinated. The rest simply wither and drop within a day or two. Bees and butterflies are too big for the job. Cacao flowers are pollinated almost exclusively by midges, tiny, biting flies barely the size of a poppy seed, sometimes nicknamed no-see-ums. A single midge can carry about 30 grains of pollen, and a flower needs well over 100 to develop into fruit, so it often takes several visits from several insects just to make one pod happen. Scientists still don't fully understand why midges do it or how to encourage more of them, which is a strange thing to admit about a crop worth over $100 billion a year. Once a flower does get pollinated, the resulting pod takes another 5 to 7 months to ripen, turning yellow, orange, or deep red depending on the variety. And because pods on the same tree ripen at wildly different times, harvesting can't be mechanized. Farmers still walk the rows with machetes or long pole knives, cutting each pod individually and carefully, right at the stem, so they don't damage the trunk since new flowers and pods will grow from those exact same spots for years to come. It's slow, entirely manual work, largely done today across a narrow belt of West African countries. Ivory Coast and Ghana alone account for roughly half the world's entire cocoa supply. Split one open and the payoff seems modest. 20 to 50 slippery, pulp-covered seeds packed inside, tasting nothing like chocolate yet, more like sour, faintly sweet fruit. A single tree, working all year, might yield enough beans for only a couple hundred bars, which is one reason cacao farming remains so labor-intensive relative to what it earns.
This next step surprises people every time. Raw cacao beans do not taste like chocolate, not even close. The chocolate flavor doesn't exist yet. It has to be created, and fermentation is where that happens. After harvest, the beans and their surrounding pulp are piled into wooden boxes or baskets covered with banana leaves and left to transform for several days. In the first 24 to 48 hours, with no oxygen present, wild yeasts feast on the sugars in the pulp and produce alcohol, and the liquefying pulp starts to drain away. Then, as air reaches the mass, bacteria take over and convert that alcohol into acetic acid, essentially vinegar, while the pile heats up from its own biological activity, sometimes reaching temperatures over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That heat is intense enough to kill the embryo inside each seed, permanently halting germination while the acid seeps in and triggers the chemical reactions that create the flavor precursors of chocolate. Without this several-day fermentation, chocolate as we know it simply wouldn't exist. The beans would stay bitter and flat no matter how they were later processed. After fermenting, the beans are spread out to dry in the sun for 1 to 2 weeks, raked by hand repeatedly to dry evenly, until their moisture content drops low enough to prevent mold. Only then are they bagged, typically in 130-pound burlap sacks, and shipped off to factories around the world. At the factory, machines sort and clean the beans, removing stray twigs, stones, and debris before sending them into roasters running between 250 degrees Fahrenheit and 300 degrees Fahrenheit for about half an hour to nearly an hour. Roasting is where the aromas we actually associate with chocolate develop, and it also makes the outer shell brittle enough to crack away easily. After roasting, the beans are cracked open, and the lightweight shells are blown away by streams of air, leaving behind the good stuff, small broken pieces called nibs, which are essentially pure concentrated cacao. Grind those nibs down and something interesting happens. Nibs are roughly half fat by weight, and the friction of grinding generates enough heat to melt that fat right there in the machine, turning solid nibs into a thick, dark liquid called chocolate liquor, or cocoa mass. Press some of that fat, cocoa butter, out, and you're left with a solid cake that can be pulverized into cocoa powder, the base for hot cocoa and baking chocolate. To make a milk chocolate bar, manufacturers blend that chocolate liquor with sugar, milk powder, and additional cocoa butter, then run the mixture through steel rollers that grind the particles down to under 20 microns, smaller than a strand of human hair, which typically measures around 70 microns across. That's the difference between chocolate that feels gritty and chocolate that feels silky on your tongue. Next comes conching, essentially a very long, very slow massage. The chocolate is continuously stirred and aerated in heated tanks for anywhere from 12 to 72 hours. This mellows out any harsh, sour notes left over from fermentation and rounds out the final flavor. The longer the conching generally, the smoother and more refined the chocolate. Then there's tempering, arguably the most delicate step of all. The liquid chocolate is heated and cooled through a precise sequence of temperatures, usually hovering in the 80s and low 90s Fahrenheit, to coax the cocoa butter's fat molecules into forming one specific, stable crystal structure. Nail this step and you get chocolate that's glossy, snaps cleanly when you break it, and, here's a fun bit of food science, melts at a temperature just below your own body heat, which is exactly why a bar can sit solid in your hand, yet dissolve smoothly the instant it hits your mouth. Finally, the tempered chocolate is poured into molds, vibrated on shaking tables to knock out any trapped air bubbles, and passed through cooling tunnels until it hardens into its final shape. It's wrapped in foil to protect it from moisture and light, boxed up, and sent out into the world, ready to become someone's stress reliever, celebration, or 3 a.m. craving.
It's worth pausing on that arc for a second. A seed once treated as sacred, once literally used to buy and sell goods in an empire, is now something most of us unwrap without a second thought on an ordinary afternoon. Every square of a chocolate bar carries traces of that entire journey. A tropical tree, a nearly invisible fly, days of fermentation, and hours of careful, patient craftsmanship. Next time you break off a piece, it might be worth remembering just how strange and remarkable a path it took to get there.